years. That is how long the war lasted. 10 years of blood and fire on the plains of Troy. And when it was finally over, when the great city fell at last, the Greek kings packed their ships and turned for home. Most of them made it back. Agamemnon returned to Mycenae and was murdered in his bath. Menelaus wandered the seas for years before finally reaching Sparta. Ajax the Lesser offended a goddess and was drowned before he ever saw Greece again. But one man's journey home became something else entirely, something longer, stranger, and more terrible than anyone could have imagined. His name was Odysseus, king of the small rocky island of Ithaca, husband, father, and, by nearly every account, the cleverest man in the Greek world. His journey home would take another 10 years. This is the story Homer tells in the Odyssey, one of the oldest surviving poems in Western literature, composed roughly in the 8th century before the Common Era, and passed down through centuries of oral tradition before anyone ever wrote it down. It is a poem about homecoming and about what homecoming costs. It is about loyalty and desire, about the temptation to stay and the compulsion to return, about identity, what it means to be a husband, a father, a king when you have been gone so long that the world has moved on without you. But before we follow Odysseus himself, we need to understand the world he is trying to return to. Back on Ithaca, things have fallen apart. Odysseus has a wife named Penelope, brilliant, steady, fiercely loyal, and a son named Telemachus, who was just a baby when his father sailed to Troy. Telemachus is now on the edge of manhood, and he has grown up in a house that has been slowly consumed by chaos. The problem is the suitors. Because Odysseus has been gone so long with no word of his fate, over 100 young noblemen from across the region have descended on the palace. They have convinced themselves, or at least they claim, that Odysseus must be dead, which means Penelope is available for remarriage, and whoever marries Penelope inherits the kingdom. So they move in. They eat Odysseus's food, drink his wine, slaughter his livestock. They hold parties in his halls, proposition his wife, and treat young Telemachus with contempt. They are, in every sense of the word, a plague. Penelope resists them through cleverness. She tells the suitors that she will choose a husband as soon as she finishes weaving a burial shroud for her elderly father, Laertes. Every day she weaves. Every night, secretly, she unravels what she has made. For 3 years she buys time this way, until one of her own maids betrays the trick. Now the suitors are growing impatient, and Telemachus, a young man who has never known his father, is growing desperate. This is where the Odyssey actually begins, not with Odysseus, but with his son. The goddess Athena takes a special interest in Odysseus. She always has. He is, in many ways, her favorite mortal, because he is smart and cunning, and because he never stops trying. Athena is the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, and Odysseus embodies both. She cannot bring Odysseus home yet. There are divine complications we will come to, but she can help set events in motion. She visits Telemachus in disguise, posing as an old family friend, and tells him something important. Your father is probably still alive. Stop letting these men ruin your home. Go find out what happened to him. Telemachus, who has spent his whole life waiting, decides to act. He calls an assembly, the first one held on Ithaca in 20 years, and publicly condemns the suitors. They mock him. He goes anyway. He secretly gathers a crew, slips out of Ithaca at night, and sails to the Greek mainland to seek news of his father. He visits Nestor, the old king of Pylos, who fought at Troy. Nestor tells him much about what happened after the war, but knows nothing of Odysseus. He sends Telemachus on to Sparta to see Menelaus. Menelaus and his wife Helen, yes, that Helen, the one whose face launched 1,000 ships, receive Telemachus with warmth, and Menelaus does have information. On his own long journey home, he captured a sea god named Proteus, the shapeshifter, who told him things. Among them, Odysseus is alive. He is stranded on an island, held there by a goddess named Calypso, and he weeps every day for home. So Odysseus lives, but Telemachus's journey home is nearly cut short. The suitors, having learned he left, have set a ship in ambush to kill him on his return. This is how desperate they are becoming. This is how dangerous the situation in Ithaca truly is. Meanwhile, on Olympus, the gods decide it is finally time to act. Odysseus has been on the island of Ogygia for 7 years. Calypso is a goddess, a nymph actually, beautiful beyond description, and she is in love with Odysseus. She has offered him everything: immortality, eternal youth, a life of ease on a paradise island. She wants him to stay with her forever, and he cannot leave. Whether it's captivity or something more complicated, he is stranded there. He sleeps with Calypso because he has no real choice, but every day he goes to the shore and stares out at the sea and grieves. He wants to go home, not for immortality, for Ithaca, for Penelope, for his son, for the ordinary mortal life he had. This is one of the Odyssey's great themes, the hero who could have paradise but chooses to be human instead. Calypso offers him everything. He chooses struggle. He chooses home. The god Hermes arrives at Calypso's island, sent by Zeus with a divine order: let Odysseus go. Calypso is furious. The gods always get to keep their mortal lovers, she protests. Why is it different for goddesses? But she obeys. She gives Odysseus tools and materials, and he builds a raft with his own hands. She gives him provisions, and after 7 years he sails away from paradise and into open ocean. He almost makes it, but the god Poseidon, who hates Odysseus since Troy, spots him from the heights of Olympus and sends a furious storm. The raft is smashed. Odysseus is thrown into the sea. He nearly drowns. A sea nymph takes pity on him and gives him a magic veil that keeps him afloat. He swims for 2 days and nights before finally crawling, naked and exhausted, onto the shore of an island called Scheria, home to a people called the Phaeacians. He hides in a pile of leaves and sleeps. He is found by a princess named Nausicaa, who has come to the shore with her handmaidens to do laundry. Odysseus wakes, recognizes his situation, and, even now, even half dead, is clever about how he approaches her. He does not grab or threaten. He speaks to her carefully, praises her beauty and grace, asks humbly for help. Nausicaa is charmed. She gives him clothes, tells him how to approach the palace, and warns him to address her mother, Queen Arete, first, because it is Arete who holds real power. The Phaeacians are a remarkable people. They are great sailors, almost magically so. Their ships navigate by instinct and need no steering. Their king, Alcinous, is generous and hospitable. They host Odysseus, hold games in his honor, and eventually ask the question everyone has been waiting to ask: who are you, stranger, and how did you come to be here? And Odysseus tells them. What follows is one of the most famous extended flashback sequences in all of literature, Odysseus narrating his own adventures in his own voice, spanning roughly 4 books of the poem. It is here that most of the Odyssey's legendary episodes live. After leaving Troy, Odysseus and his ships of 12 ships made their first stop at a place called Ismarus, home of the Cicones. They raided the city, a brutal beginning, but his men refused to leave quickly enough, and the Cicones rallied their forces. Odysseus lost 6 men from each ship before they could escape. Then a great storm drove them off course, and the wandering truly began. The Lotus Eaters. They came to a land where the inhabitants ate a plant that caused anyone who tasted it to forget everything: home, family, the desire to return. Odysseus's scouts ate the lotus and had to be dragged back to the ships by force, weeping the whole way. This is the first metaphor the poem offers for the seductive power of forgetting. The Cyclops, the most famous episode. Odysseus led a small scouting party into a cave belonging to a Cyclops named Polyphemus, a giant, one-eyed, the son of Poseidon, and were trapped when the creature rolled a boulder across the entrance. Polyphemus began eating the men 2 by 2. Odysseus could not simply kill the creature; they would be trapped inside with the boulder. Instead, he got the Cyclops drunk on strong wine, and when he asked his name, Odysseus said, "Nobody." When the Cyclops passed out, Odysseus drove a sharpened stake into his eye. He screamed. The other Cyclops came running and asked, "Who is hurting you?" He screamed back, "Nobody is hurting me," and they went away. Odysseus and his men escaped clinging to the undersides of the giant's sheep as they were led out in the morning. A brilliant plan. But then Odysseus made a fatal mistake. As they pulled away, he could not resist shouting his real name back at the blinded Cyclops, taunting him. Polyphemus called on his father Poseidon to curse Odysseus, to delay him, ruin his ships, kill his men, and if he must reach home, let him arrive late, alone, and in misery. Poseidon heard. Aeolus and the Winds. The god of winds gave Odysseus a bag containing all the unfavorable winds so that only a following wind was free to blow them home. They were within sight of Ithaca when Odysseus, exhausted, fell asleep. His men, suspicious that the bag contained treasure, opened it. All the winds rushed out. The ships were blown all the way back to Aeolus, who refused to help again. He now believed the gods must be against Odysseus. The Lastystronians, giants who cannibalized the crew and sank 11 of the 12 ships with boulders. Only Odysseus's ship survived. Circe, the witch goddess of the island of Aia. She turned half of Odysseus's remaining crew into pigs. Odysseus went to rescue them, protected by a divine herb given to him by Hermes, and forced Circe to undo the enchantment. Then, and this is the Odyssey being fully honest about human nature, he stayed for a year, eating, drinking, sleeping with the goddess, while his men pleaded with him to remember home. Eventually, he remembered. Circe helped him, but she told him something terrible. Before he could go home, he had to visit the land of the dead. The underworld. Perhaps the most extraordinary passage in the poem. He sailed to the edge of the world, made offerings, and summoned the dead. They came to him in crowds, ghosts, pale and insubstantial, craving the blood of the sacrifice, which temporarily restored their ability to speak. He spoke with the prophet Tiresias, who warned him of dangers ahead. He saw his own mother. She had died of grief while he was away, and he did not know, and tried 3 times to embrace her, but her arms passed through her shade. He saw the great heroes of Troy, Achilles, who said he would rather be a living slave than a dead king, and Agamemnon, who warned him bitterly about trusting women. The underworld is where the poem pauses to grieve for lost time, lost companions, lost mothers. It is the emotional core of the whole story. The Sirens, creatures whose singing was so beautiful that sailors were compelled to steer towards them and were wrecked on the rocks. Circe had warned Odysseus. He had his men plug their ears with wax and lash him to the mast. He alone heard the siren's song, heard it, and could not act on it. He strained against the ropes and begged to be released. His men tied him tighter. They sailed past Scylla and Charybdis, a narrow strait with a monster on each side. Charybdis was a whirlpool that could swallow a ship whole. Scylla was a creature with 6 heads, each with 3 rows of teeth. Circe had warned Odysseus to hug the Scylla side, better to lose 6 men than the whole ship. He did not tell his crew. 6 men were snatched from the deck and devoured while Odysseus watched. He said it was the worst thing he ever saw. The cattle of the sun. Tiresias had warned him, "Whatever you do, do not harm the sacred cattle on the island of Thrinacia. They belong to the sun god Helios. They are untouchable." They landed in a storm and were stuck for a month. Odysseus made his men swear an oath not to touch the cattle. Then he fell asleep. His men, starving, broke the oath. They slaughtered and ate the cattle of the sun. When they finally sailed, Zeus sent a storm and a lightning bolt. The ship was destroyed. Every man died. Odysseus survived, clinging to debris, and was eventually carried to Ogygia, to Calypso, to 7 more years of exile. That's where his story began, when we first met him weeping on the shore. More treasure than he would have brought from Troy, and that night, while he sleeps, they carry him to Ithaca and leave him on the shore. He wakes alone. He doesn't recognize the island at first. Then Athena appears and tells him where he is, and for a moment, just a moment, something breaks open in him. He is home. But Athena counsels caution. The suitors are dangerous. He cannot simply walk into his own palace. She disguises him as an old beggar man and sends him first to the hut of Eumaeus, his loyal swineherd, one of the few servants who has never given up on his master's return. Meanwhile, Telemachus is on his way home from Sparta, warned by Athena about the ambush. He lands safely and goes to Eumaeus as well. There, father and son meet for the first time, or the first time Telemachus can remember. Odysseus reveals himself. Telemachus is stunned, and they begin to plan. Odysseus, still disguised as a beggar, enters his own palace. What he sees fills him with rage he must conceal. The suitors are loud and arrogant, holding court in his hall. They throw things at the beggar. They mock him. He endures it. His old dog, Argos, recognizes him immediately despite the disguise. Argos was a puppy when Odysseus left. Now he is ancient, neglected, lying on a dung heap. He raises his head, wags his tail one final time, and dies. He had waited 20 years. Penelope, who does not know her husband has returned, hears there is a strange beggar in the palace and asks to speak with him. Travelers sometimes bring news. She meets Odysseus and speaks with him at length without recognizing him. He invents a story about having once hosted Odysseus in Crete. He describes Odysseus's clothing and appearance so accurately that Penelope weeps. He tells her Odysseus is alive and nearly home. She almost believes it. She has hoped and been disappointed so many times. And then she announces her decision. Tomorrow she will hold a contest. Whoever can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads in a row, as Odysseus himself used to do, will become her husband. It is a test no suitor can possibly pass. The bow is impossibly powerful. It has been untouched for 20 years. But Odysseus can pass it, and he plans to. The next day, the suitors assemble. The bow is brought out. One by one, they try to string it. One by one, they fail. Some cannot even bend it. They heat it, grease it, strain against it, nothing. Odysseus, still in disguise, asks if he might try. The suitors are furious and contemptuous. Who is this beggar to touch a great bow? But Penelope says he may. Telemachus sends her mother to her room. What is about to happen she should not see. Odysseus picks up the bow. He examines it carefully, the way a craftsman checks his tools. He strings it effortlessly. He plucks the string once. It sings like a bird. Then he picks up an arrow and shoots it through all 12 axe heads. He looks at Telemachus. Telemachus nods. Odysseus turns and shoots the leader of the suitors through the throat. What follows is a prolonged, brutal battle. Odysseus and Telemachus and 2 loyal servants against over 100 men. Athena is there, guiding arrows, unnerving the suitors. The suitors scramble for weapons, but Telemachus has secretly removed all their arms from the hall. They are slaughtered, almost to a man. The disloyal servants are executed. The maids who betrayed Penelope are hanged. The hall is cleaned, incense is burned, and Odysseus, his work done, asks to see his wife. Penelope comes down. She sits across from Odysseus. She looks at him for a long time. She does not run to him. She does not weep with joy. She is still, guarded. 20 years have taught her caution. She has seen too many stories, too many false hopes. Even now, she is not certain. Telemachus is frustrated. He scolds her. Can she not see? But Odysseus says, "Leave her. She is testing me." That is right. He is correct. She is testing him. She tells a servant to move the marriage bed out of the bedroom, make it up elsewhere for the stranger. It is a small, deliberate thing to say. Odysseus reacts with shock and anger. That bed cannot be moved. He built it himself. One of its posts is a living olive tree rooted in the earth. The room was built around it. It is immovable. No one alive knows this except Penelope, Odysseus, and one old servant. Penelope's composure breaks. Tears come. She goes to him. She tells him she tested him because she was afraid of being deceived, as Helen was deceived, as so many women in these stories have been. She knew it was him when he said those words. He holds her. They weep together. And then they talk. They talk all night. She tells him everything that happened while he was gone. He tells her his story, abbreviated for now. There will be time. They have the rest of their lives. They fall asleep together as the night ends and morning begins. The Odyssey ends with a few final complications, a confrontation with the families of the slaughtered suitors, settled by divine intervention. But the emotional ending is that bedroom, that bed, that conversation between 2 people who have survived 20 years apart and find each other essentially intact. The poem, at its heart, is a love story, but it is also something more, a meditation on what it means to be human.